Thanks, everyone. My name is Justin Mayer. I'm originally from Los Angeles, California, but about 2 weeks ago, I moved to a small mountain village in the Alpine region of Italy. It's about 200 people in the village, so that's exciting for me. I build web applications. My most recent one is called Fortressa, which allows you to build your own VPN, your own private, self-contained VPN that you're not sharing with anyone else. In my spare time, I maintain a static site generator called Pelican, as you may have heard. So I've presented talks in America, Italy, Japan, Slovakia, Ireland, and now this is my first time speaking in the Czech Republic, so I'm really excited. I'm also excited today to talk to you about multi-factor authentication. And my goal is that by the end of the day today, you will understand why multi-factor authentication is important, why the traditional usage of passwords is not really optimal, and ways in which you can implement multi-factor authentication in any projects that you might be involved with. So the first question I'd like to address is why? Like, why is this important? In 2016 alone, there was over 1 billion records stolen. Records meaning personally identifiable information. Could be names, addresses, social security numbers, just information that you generally consider to be private. And this is only accelerating. The average time to detect a malicious or criminal breach of some kind in most environments, the average is 170 days. That is a long time to not know that someone has stolen records from your systems. And so you can do a lot of damage when you have 170 days to use that data without anybody knowing. And the question is, have you personally been affected by this? There's a site where you can find out. Have I been pwned.com, or however you pronounce that. And the answer to the question of, have you been pwned? Probably. When I put in my email address, I found no fewer than 7 different sites that had, copies of some information of mine. So this is not good, and it has costs, and the costs can be, the obvious one can be monetary, but it can be availability. Your service or your site can be offline. You can have data loss. These things inevitably end up to be monetary in one way or another, and it can be a lot of money. By 2019, that's only next year, that's a lot of zeros. That's 2 trillion euro estimated in damages next year. And by 2021, just 2 years later, that number is supposed to triple to 6 trillion euro. So why? Why does this sort of thing happen? The obvious reason is that software is a big Rube Goldberg machine with the twine bubble gum, and it's just sort of barely held together. And we all know this because we deal with it every day. But one of the main reasons that it also happens is because of passwords. It's not the only reason, but it's a big contributor. And the problem with passwords is that they are ubiquitous everywhere. Almost everything that you authenticate into uses a password. But not only are they ubiquitous, they are also terrible. And this is something that we should do something about. When you evaluate authentication methods, one of the things you look at is security versus usability. And traditionally, this has been a trade-off, where if you improve one, you're doing so by sacrificing the other. It's a zero-sum game. Not ideal, because really you want both of them. The problem is that I'm going to make the case that passwords have both bad usability and bad security. But let's start with the security side of it. And one of the reasons that passwords are bad is because people choose bad passwords, like really bad passwords. You've probably seen, these kinds of things before, whether it's an uncle of yours or, a friend. But this is much more common than you even realize. It's estimated that approximately 17% of passwords, that's 1/5 of all accounts protected by a password, use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That accounts for 20% of passwords globally. And that's terrible. It's wide open. And why are these bad? They're bad because they're trivial to either brute force or look up in a dictionary. The other thing that people do with passwords is they write them down, or they will email them to their colleague, leaving it available in some computer system until the heat death of the universe. These are things that people do all the time. They reuse passwords. They'll use one password for every single thing they log into. Again, not something that you really want to happen. As soon as one of them gets compromised, you now have access to all of that user's accounts. Phishing is probably authentication's hardest problem. If you're not familiar with the term, phishing means someone goes into, someone creates some fake thing that you think is real. Like for example, they'll create a PayPal page that you think is real. They'll make it look really just like the way that PayPal's login page looks like. You'll put in your login credentials, thinking you're logging into PayPal, and now they have access to your username, your password, and all of the funds in your account. So this is an extremely common and very hard problem to solve. And it's getting worse. There's a researcher named Eric Lawrence, and he wrote a great article describing the line of death. And this is this line that runs across your browser, where everything above it is trusted, and everything below it can probably be faked pretty easily. So if you're looking at the domain, like, okay, well, at least I know that I'm on the right domain. Well, the problem is the line of death is expanding. As browsers, the browser manufacturers or browser software developers change the things that can be modified by JavaScript and other things that that happen over the network, you move from like a line of death to like zones of death. So the things in red are things you can't trust. Everything else you can. Well, as you can tell, it's shrinking. And with the addition of HTML5, you now have a full screen API. So the zones of death have become a wall of death. So it's just death all the way down now, where the entire thing can be manipulated. So again, this is phishing. It's a problem. Password security is terrible. What about the usability side of it? Well, the problem is that choosing a password is also fraught with all kinds of problems. People will choose bad passwords, as we've established, and if they choose secure ones, they generally will never remember it. And if you choose a memorable one, chances are it won't be very secure. So regardless as to whether you choose good ones or not, people forget them constantly. So we have poor security and poor usability. It's the worst of both worlds. And if there's supposed to be a trade-off between security and usability, why have we settled on a system that has the worst of both of those? And the answer is that authentication is hard. If there were a better solution that was easy to deploy, that had good security and good usability, we would have done it already a long time ago. But there's another possible factor, and that's that inertia plays a significant role. It's what we all started with. Passwords are as old as time, and that's what people are used to. So because authentication is hard, and because passwords pose challenges, people come up with mitigations, ways of making them less terrible. And instead of replacing the password, we keep trying to fix it. And one of the ways in which we fix it are password managers. And these help generate secure passwords. They help us store them so that we don't need to remember them. Browser integration can be very useful, so you can just hit a key command and automatically populate fields with your data from your password manager. And it securely stores your passwords, assuming that you put in a reasonably secure master password. So good security, the password managers provide good security, but the usability part of it really makes adoption challenging. A lot of people don't use them because they find them confusing. It's an extra step. It's more difficult than just remembering one easy-to-remember password that you use everywhere. And a strong master password, if you're going to make the vault secure, is a pain to type over and over again. Another thing that people do is limit failed attempts. If you are involved with a system that limits failed attempts, please don't do this. And I'm going to underline the things that I'm going to highlight the things that we really shouldn't be doing. But it seems like a good idea, right? If we get failed attempts, we should lock people out so that the bad people can't continue to guess. The problem is this becomes a denial of service vector. So, you can just keep attacking a site and keep guessing, and then you've now locked someone out, someone who's now can't get access to their account unless they contact customer service. So because of the denial of service vector, this method is not really used anymore. Changing your password often. I'm amazed that in 2018, we still see people saying you should change your password often. This is not good advice. And the reason is that, it seems like it would make sense, but the problem is it encourages people to choose short, memorable passwords, because if they're constantly changing their passwords to something long and complicated, they're not going to remember it, so they just use a single weak password everywhere. Security questions are another thing that people use, and I'm sure whoever came up with the concept of security questions thought it was a good idea at the time, but as soon as you tell one site, like, this was my favorite high school teacher, or this is the name of the street that I grew up on, or this is my favorite book, or whatever it is, well, all that has to do is get hacked once, and now you can use those security questions to get access to that user's other accounts. So they're basically built-in, reused passwords that you cannot revoke, because if you get asked that question, you're naturally going to answer it properly. So instead, what myself and other people do is put in random strings of garbage into the security questions, and then you have fun experiences with customer service representatives where they say, what's the name of your favorite pet? X49-2712. Strength enforcement. This is where you go to a password entry form, or when you're creating your account, and they try to measure how strong your password is. And the industry has sort of rallied behind the idea of putting the responsibility on the developer to ensure that the user puts in a secure password. Well, the problem is that users hate this. They complain. It generates lots of support requests. According to at least one source, up to 50% of all support tickets related to passwords in some way or another. That's a huge amount of money to spend on customer support. My own experience bears this out. And users leave. They get tired of dealing with it. And you can't really afford to have users leave because they get frustrated with the experience. So really, these sort of meters that measure how strong a password is, they're user hostile. They often dictate arbitrary systems that say, like, you have to have one uppercase, one lowercase, one number, one symbol, instead of focusing on actual entropy. How random is the password? And that's what people should focus on, and yet that's rarely what these strength measurement tools do. So I get really frustrated when some site tells me that a 10-character password with a number, a symbol, and mixed case is somehow better than my 50-character password that you rejected because it's too long. Yeah, you all have experienced the same thing, I see. So, they find this experience, users find this experience frustrating, and so they just settle for whatever it takes to make the bar green, and so they can move on to the next step. Now, let's say that you've overcome all these obstacles and you actually get a secure password. You still have all of the other problems that come with passwords. And more importantly, your system is only as secure as the email account that the person is generally using, with your system. So, all it takes is someone to compromise the email account, and then now, because of password resets, can have access to your entire suite of accounts. So many people have tried to replace the password. Almost all of them have failed, and so the password just stubbornly remains like some pest infestation that we can't get rid of. And there's a bunch of alternatives out there, and some of them are starting to gain a little bit of traction, and I want to kind of go over some of those. Email. In some cases, not all, but in some cases, it actually makes sense to use email as the only authentication method. Users never have to choose a password. They never have to store one, remember it. I don't know if you've ever seen any solutions that do this, but but I'll kind of just show you one example. This is a system that I was involved with, where when you go to create your account, you put in your email address, it sends you a link, you tap on that link, account is created. Login process, same thing. You go to the login page, you put in your email address, you hit the button, it sends you a link, you tap on the link, you're logged in. And this is a flow that really works well for a lot of different use cases. Now, whenever I mention this, I get people saying, but Justin, if the user's email account is compromised, then an attacker can access the site account. And then I say, does your site have a password reset feature? Yeah. Well, then you have the same problem, plus all of the other problems that go along with passwords. Because password resets is basically the exact same flow. This just gets rid of the password. So with this, you have good security and good usability. And so I believe the email-based authentication is already an improvement over the usual username and password combination. Yay. So this is growing in a very slow manner. Medium, the site publishing tool that Twitter is involved with, they use this method. There are some downsides. One is email delivery. If you can't deliver the message that says your account's been created, tap on the link, or here's your login link, then you're going to have problems. Some people are accustomed to passwords. They get used to it. They don't want a system that doesn't use passwords. Experienced users don't like the latency. They don't want to wait for the link to arrive. They're used to using passwords. They use a password manager. This is a retro step backwards for more experienced users. And again, similar criticism. The account is only as secure as the email system and the user's password that protects it. So that's also a problem. When most people think about two-factor authentication, they think of getting a code via text message or sometimes a phone call. And this is very common. Unfortunately, it's not very secure. SMS messages are displayed on your phone. If you walk away from your phone, sometimes those things can be intercepted. But really, the most severe problem is it's linked to a phone number, which means you have an external company managing that's not part of the flow. And it's outside your control. So attackers can use social engineering. They can if they get access to your email account, they can use social engineering to get a reset link sent to the email account, and then they're in. Some people have even contacted phone carriers and said, like, oh, hey, I lost my SIM card. Can you send me a new one? Sure. Here's my address. And they send the attacker the SIM card. You put the SIM card in. Now they're getting the SMS codes. Once again, they're in. Another problem is that the SS7 network, which is a protocol used by telecom providers to interconnect and communicate with one another, is not very secure, and a few months ago, some thieves used this flaw to get access to bank transfers that normally wouldn't have been possible without confirming by text message. So even without access to the email account, even without a SIM card, sometimes these things can be used to steal a lot of money. So for that reason, I believe that using SMS or voice calls for multi-factor authentication is a bad idea. If someone asks for your phone number to establish multi-factor authentication, you know something's wrong right there. For me, it's my phone number. Like, you have no reason to ask for it. It's not something I feel comfortable sharing. And maybe you are, and that's okay. But you shouldn't be forced to provide your phone number just to get extra, better protection of your account. And that's what's really happening when someone asks you for your phone number to set up multi-factor authentication. Another technique, and this is now one that I actually like, is called TOTP, or time-based one-time passwords. This combines a shared secret with the current timestamp using a cryptographic hash function and generates a one-time password. And this is more widely supported than some of the other methods out there. It's GitHub, Linode, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Dropbox, WordPress, Facebook, Rackspace. Like it's used in a lot of places. You've probably seen it. You get a 6-digit code generated usually by an app on your phone. I use 1Password because I already use that to manage my accounts. It does this really cool thing where I can log into a site, it automatically populates the 6-digit code onto the clipboard, I can hit paste, and then I'm straight through. I don't have to actually even look at my phone if I don't want to. So this is kind of the flow for GitHub. You may have seen it before. This is how it looks for Linode. You enter in username and password. The next step, you put in your 6-digit code, and then you continue. The problem with this, which is a good solution, but it does have some problems. And one of them is the same unfortunate phishing and man-in-the-middle attacks. You can set up sort of fake things that get people to submit this information. Like one of the more insidious ones that I remember from last year was the password reset man-in-the-middle attack, which was you in sort of real time got people to enter in information on a fake site that was then used to enter in the two-factor auth, on the actual site. Very clever, but it's a reason why this isn't perfect. There's a tool that I saw very recently, just in the last couple of days, called Evil Nginx. It's like evil and Nginx with the N gone. But it's a tool designed to automate multi-factor authentication sniffing. It's written in Go, super fast, and makes it easy to bypass two-factor authentication, including one-time passwords. And when the author was asked about mitigation, he said, yeah, well, if it were me, I would probably use hardware keys, like U2F or some other things. And so let's talk about hardware keys. They can support one-time passwords, but because of the phishing and other issues, I'm going to talk about something else called universal second factor. So these are usually USB-based. They're very small, they're portable, they're extremely hard for someone to exfiltrate the data that's contained inside. It's supported by GitHub, Google, Dropbox, and a couple others. And the next generation of this just became a standard called web authentication. And when Google did a study across their 50,000 employees, they found it worked really well, and it was a huge success for them. Unfortunately, the browser support for U2F is not great. It's, as you can tell, only 29% of the current global population uses a browser that supports U2F. That's almost all entirely Google Chrome. And Firefox has support for it behind a flag, but it hasn't really worked very well in my testing. It's kind of flaky. Safari, yeah, no. So the good news is that support for the successor standard, web authentication, has better commitment in terms of support for it. I've sort of circled the WebKit status, which is under consideration. So we've improved somewhat on the Safari front. The bad news is that 0.135% of the current global population uses a browser that supports it, but that will change in the months and years to come. So it works really well in a controlled environment where you can just say, hey, employee, here's your key. This is how you're going to log into things. It's tougher for consumer things, like you're not going to just mail keys to all of your consumers. So it doesn't work quite as well in a outside of a controlled environment. There's some awkwardness as far as in a desktop environment. Like on my notebook, it's great. Like it's this tiny, almost invisible USB-C thing that slides into the side. It's almost flush with the machine. It's a permanent fixture of my machine, which is great. On a desktop, it's a little clunkier where, if depending on where your computer is placed, and, I have basically an extension cord that I use to tap my key. So it doesn't always work well. I want to take a quick aside and talk about biometrics. Because they're so common, thumbprints, face recognition is now a thing, apparently. And this is decent enough security for certain use cases, but the problem is that you cannot revoke it. You cannot say, I'm revoking my fingerprints, I'm revoking my face, and you should be able to revoke authentication credentials. So I'm not a big fan of biometric stuff. It's fine as a factor, but anytime someone offers you something where it's the only factor, just run in the other direction, because that is a terrible idea. So, the reason why I'm talking about this now, the reason why it's important, I think, for everyone now is that the cost of not taking action is very severe, and it's starting to become vetted and incorporated by rather large companies. And so my call to action for you is to apply pressure to two significant sides. One is the sites you use. Like if you have a bank or a health insurance or something where like your most important data is contained. Like reach out to those sites and say, hey, I want not only two-factor authentication, I want like good multi-factor authentication, like no SMS stuff. I only am interested in, if it's not one-time passwords or U2F, something's wrong. Like if you are specific, we can try to get sites to see exactly what they should be doing, because they usually get it wrong. They almost always get it wrong. When I look at all of my banks, my health insurance company, not one of them does this correctly, in my opinion. And I'm not being like super, picky. It's just terrible across the board. And we should be asking better for ourselves, for our friends, for our family members. And then there's the browser vendors, right? So good news is, Firefox and Chrome are on board with web authentication, which is the successing standard to U2F. But if you're a Mac user, be vocal. Like reach out to Apple and be like, hey, Safari, come on, let's get with the program here. Everyone else is on board. And the other thing is, this is good to affect change. You can be vocal, but it takes time and it's not in your control. It's not in our control. But there is something that you can control, which is what you build. So if you're working on something, at a bare minimum, require multi-factor authentication for admin level access. So anyone who gets access to, say, all user accounts on your system, they should be required to use multi-factor authentication. It's a controlled environment. You can issue hardware keys. You can set things up. It's a small group. You can tell them this is how it works. And then offer multi-factor authentication to your users so that they have the ability to use it if they want to. I'm going to go really fast during some implementations. Django No Password, this is what I've used to implement email-based authentication. It's worked well. Portier is a successor to Mozilla Persona, also email-based. Worth looking at, might work for your particular use case. Django OTP is a one-time password library. It's good. It assumes multiple devices, which is both good and bad for reasons I can't really get into. It's good documentation. It's updated regularly. They assume that multi-factor authentication is required. The built-in forms assume that it's required. I kind of like it to be optional because, as we've discussed, if you're a sort of B2C or consumer-focused site, you can't just tell your 500,000 users, like, well, you have to use this. So I started experimenting after that with Django U2F, and it includes a demo project, which I find really nice. I wish that were more common, to find a demo project inside the repository. And it's really easy to get this up and running. You pip install the library, a couple of other ancillary libraries. You need to have SSL, even for localhost, because U2F requires localhost connections. And you make a couple of code modifications. This is a diff of the settings file in terms of like your stock settings file and then what you have to add. You add a few apps. You add a couple of URL lines. Make a couple of changes to how the URLs are imported into their own namespace. And you add a base template. And you run the local run server. And then when you fire it up, this is what you get. You enter in your username and password like you normally would. And if you access the settings, you can manage your U2F keys, you can manage your backup codes, and your OTP codes. So it has support for all three, and I really like that. You can set up one, you can set up two, you can set up all three. And adding a U2F key is really easy. You tap the add a key. You're then prompted to plug the key in and tap on it. When you do that, you get a little notification, key added. And this is all unstyled because this is the way the library comes. You can style it and make it look nice. This is just how it comes out of the box. You can add backup emergency codes. This way, if you don't have your key, if you don't have your phone on you and you still need to get in, you can have these codes stored in a password manager to use to get into your account. Adding a one-time password, super easy. You tap the link. You get a QR code. And like normally, I think QR codes are silly. This is probably like the one good use of QR codes I've seen, because you pull out your phone, you scan it, and then you instantly have that that link created, and then your phone is now generating the 6-digit codes that you need in order to log in. So you put in your username and password just like you would for any other account, and then you have the ability in the password manager to add a one-time password. You scan that code. You get the 6-digit number. You're then prompted to put it in and to register that. And so now it's all set up, and the device has been added. So we see the device has been added, and there's a button to remove it in case it's compromised. Now let's log out and see what the process is like when you log in. Well, after you put in your username and password, the next secondary step is I've set up all three. So you can put in you can use a security key, you can use a one-time password, you can use a backup code. So I really love having these three options. Like it really reduces the lockout anxiety. I think that a lot of problems with multi-factor authentication is that people get concerned that it's either too time-consuming. They get concerned, well, what if I don't have my key on me? What if I what if I leave my phone behind? Like, who leaves their phone behind? But anyway, fine. So you left your phone behind. Then you have your emergency codes. And so you have these different options. And I really like the simplicity and flexibility of the project. If you're creating a new Django project, consider using this to add multi-factor authentication. So I have two requests, just as a way of summarizing all of this. One is, again, demand and be vocal about your sites that you use and ask them to support really strong multi-factor authentication that doesn't ask you to provide your phone number or send you SMS messages. And the other one is to, again, reach out to browser vendors and make sure that they're supporting these things so that it's ubiquitous. We can do better, but we can't do that if we don't collectively take action and are vocal about it. So if you work on an application and you have the ability to influence adding multi-factor authentication to your own apps, do it for yourself, do it for your users, your friends, your family. So I would love to tell you more about this. I don't have time for questions, but please come and find me, say hello, or reach me on Twitter, and I'm available on whatever channel you like. So I look forward to talking to you. Thank you very much for your time.